Welcome back to Self-Help. In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to make better goals. So I had a different plan for this week's video, but I switched it at the last second because I feel like this subject is especially relevant as we begin a new year. People like to set goals at New Year's. New calendar, it's a clean slate. It feels like an opportunity for a fresh new start. So I know that a lot of people are talking about their New Year's goals and resolutions. And that's all great. And maybe this has happened to you. It's for sure happened to me. But you get about 3 weeks into January, and then for whatever reason, you stop striving for this goal. That's why we have a bunch of dusty treadmills, books that were never read, and projects that were never completed. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm well aware of the resources that already exist about goal setting, like SMART goals and other different resources that are really helpful for people in making effective and meaningful goals. But I want to cover one today that maybe you haven't thought of before. This is something I use a lot in therapy and something I've used in my own life, which has helped me greatly. The gist of it is that goals are going to be a lot more meaningful and attainable if they are based on your values. So we're striving for value-based goals. Now, before we get any further, I need to explain the difference between values and goals. A goal is something that you can achieve or accomplish or complete or attain. It's a little more tangible and you know when you've achieved it. Oftentimes they deal with quantities and completion. Think of it like traveling to LA. There will come a point in time that as you travel, you will eventually reach LA. You'll be there. You'll be in LA, and you will have achieved that goal. Hold that in your mind for a minute, and we're going to switch over to values. Values are a little bit different. They're like overarching themes for our life. They are based on who and what is truly important to us. They're a little bit different than goals because values can never be achieved or completed. They're more of a way of living or a guide for our everyday actions. Going back to our example of traveling to LA, that's a goal. A value would be like traveling west. West is just a direction or a way that you travel. You never actually make it to west. You can travel west for the rest of your life, and you'll know when you're not traveling west because you'll either be going north, south, or east, but you never actually get to west. It's not an actual place. It's just a direction. So that's how we differentiate goals and values. Goals are attainable. It's like traveling to LA. Values are who and what is important to us, but they're not something that we can actually achieve. So it's like traveling west. So now that we know the difference between goals and values, it's important to set up goals that are consistent with our values. This is what makes goals meaningful and sets us up for the highest likelihood of success. Think of goals as little checkpoints along the way as you move toward your values. Now, you might be thinking, well, how do I know what my values are? That's a great question, and here's how. If we were meeting one-on-one in therapy, I would do what's called a card sort activity, where I would give you a bunch of different cards with values on them, and we do this sorting activity to find out which ones are like your top 5. Going into this, it's really important to understand that these values are completely personal to you. And it's really important to be true to what and who is important to you. That was kind of catchy. Be true to what and who is important to you. I'm going to have to use that. Get a trademark for it or something. Basically what I'm saying is that it's easy to let our values be really influenced by society and the people around us. I've definitely had to go through this process a few times to let those influences dissolve so that it's purely what is important and meaningful to me. And it got to the point where I was almost surprised by what didn't make it into my top 5 because society and culture has given me an idea of what those things should be, but for me, that just wasn't the case. And that's okay. Anyway, because we're not one-on-one in therapy, I'm going to point you to a really good resource to find out what your top 5 values are. It's a website called valuetest.com. I'll put a link in the description, but basically, it's an activity for you to find out what your top 5 values are. And the best part is this is a completely free resource, so you get all your results and everything for absolutely no charge. When you get there, the first page is an introduction, which you may or may not read. Honestly, I haven't, and that's okay. I'm sure it's wonderful. And toward the bottom of the page, it's going to say, click here to begin. So for step 1, there's a paragraph of instructions that you should read, and then there's a huge list of different values that you're going to select from. I feel like this is a pretty good list, and I haven't come across somebody who has wished that something would be on this list when it's not, so just go through it and follow the instructions. Step 2 has some important instructions to make your life easier later on. Basically, you want to combine different values that are really similar to each other and just choose one representative for that group of values that represents all of them. Step 3 gives you important information on the voting process. And step 4 is that voting process so that you can find out what your top 5 values are. Once you've completed all the voting, your results are in. It might be helpful to bookmark that page or to write them down somewhere so you won't forget them. It's also kind of cool because it shows you how your values coincide with everybody else's who have taken this test. So the idea behind these values is that as long as you're living according to these values, or basically you're moving toward them, or you're letting them guide your life, and your actions are consistent with these values, you're going to find a lot of meaning and well-being in your life. And to me, that sounds pretty great because I feel like a lot of satisfaction and peace comes when we're living according to our values, or we feel like our life has real meaning. So now what you do is you take those top 5 values and you come up with a bunch of ideas of actions that fit into each one of those values. Maybe one of your values is health. Some possible actions that are consistent with that value are eating healthy and exercising. Now you can come up with goals based on those actions that are consistent with those values. And if health didn't make it as one of your top 5 values, that's okay. It didn't make it into mine either. So I'm not going to make a bunch of goals for exercising right now because I know that that's not super meaningful to me at this time. And it's really important to keep in mind that values can change. So even though health isn't in my top 5 right now, it might be next year or even in a couple months. And that's fantastic. In the meantime, for example, creativity is one of my top 5 values. I use making these YouTube videos as a method for moving toward that value. And a goal I've had since starting this channel is that I would post 1 video a week. And so far, I've been able to maintain that goal. Maybe a little annoying for you, but that's great for me. And maybe someday that will change. And that's okay. As long as I'm making goals that are consistent with my values, it'll be okay. So, going into this new year, and at any other point in your life, I hope that you can make goals that are consistent with your values. Because value-based goals are just more meaningful. And the more meaningful a goal is for you, the more likely you are to work for it and achieve it. I hope you're all able to make it to LA on your journey traveling west. Because again, value-based living is the best kind of living. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.